Hello, readers. I hope everybody's having a wonderful day and you're ready to read a book with me. Today, the book I have is Ruby the Copycat by Peggy Rathmann. I bet you've heard of somebody called a copycat before. Let's see. Ruby the Copycat. Monday was Ruby's first day in Miss Hart's class. Class, this is Ruby, announced Miss Hart. Ruby, you may use the empty desk behind Angela. Angela is the girl with the pretty red bow in her hair. Angela smiled at Ruby. Ruby smiled at Angela's bow and tiptoed to her seat. Readers, I'm thinking that she looks really nervous. But some of you have been nervous. I know I've been nervous on my first day. I hope everyone had a pleasant weekend, said Miss Hart. Does anyone have something to share? I was the flower girl at my sister's wedding, said Angela. That's exciting, said Miss Hart. Ruby raised her hand halfway too. I was the flower girl at my sister's wedding too. What a coincidence, said Miss Hart. Angela turned and smiled at Ruby. Ruby smiled at the top of Angela's head. Class, please take out your reading books, said Miss Hart. At lunchtime, Ruby hopped all the way home on one foot. When Ruby came back to school, she was wearing a red bow in her hair. She slid in her seat behind Angela. I like your bow, whispered Angela. I like yours too, whispered Ruby. Class, please take out your math books, said Miss Hart. I'm already seeing that Ruby's starting to have a bow like the other little girl. I wonder if that is why this is called Ruby the Copycat. Let's see what happens. On Tuesday morning, Angela wore a sweater with daisies on it. At lunchtime, Ruby hopped home sideways. When Ruby came back to school after lunch, she was wearing a sweater with daisies on it. I like your sweater, whispered Angela. I like yours too, whispered Ruby. On Wednesday, Angela wore a hand-painted t-shirt and matching sneakers. After lunch, Ruby hopped back to school wearing a hand-painted t-shirt with matching sneakers. Why are you sitting like that? Whispered Angela. Wet paint, said Ruby. On Thursday morning, during share time, Angela modeled the flower girl dress she wore to her sister's wedding. Ruby modeled her flower girl dress too, right after lunch. Angela didn't whisper anything. Readers, I'm wondering why. Why did Angela not whisper anything this time? I'm also wondering how is it making Angela feel that Ruby's kind of copying what she's doing? By coincidence, on Friday morning, both girls wore red and lavender striped dresses. At lunchtime, Angela raced home. When Angela came back to school, she was wearing black. Look at her face. Ooh, her face does not look happy. On Friday afternoon, Miss Hart asked everyone to write a short poem. Who would like to read first? Asked Miss Hart. Angela raised her hand. She stood by her desk and read. I had a cat I could not see because it stayed in back of me. It was a very loyal pet. It's sad we never really met. That was very good, said Miss Hart. Now, who's next? Miss Hart looked around the room. Ruby? Ruby stood and recited slowly. I had a nice pet who I never met because it always stayed behind me, and I'm sure it was a cat too. Ruby smiled at the back of Angela's head, and someone whispered. Ruby sat down. What a coincidence, murmured Miss Hart. Oh, readers, if I look really closely, Miss Hart, she's got her hand to her hand like, oh no. Angela looks a little angry, and there's people whispering. I'm starting to think that there's a problem. A big problem is getting ready to happen. Let's see. Angela scribbled something on a piece of paper. She passed it to Ruby. The note said, "You copied me. I'm telling Miss Hart. P.S. I hate your hair that way." Ruby buried her chin in the collar of her blouse. A big tear rolled down her nose and plopped onto the note. When the bell rang, Miss Hart sent everyone home except Ruby. Miss Hart closed the door of the schoolroom and sat on the edge of Ruby's desk. "Ruby, dear," she said gently, "you don't need to copy everything Angela does. You can be anything you want to be. But be Ruby first. I like Ruby." Miss Hart smiled at Ruby. Ruby smiled at Miss Hart's beautiful polished fingernails. "Have a nice weekend," said Miss Hart. "Have a nice weekend," said Ruby. On Monday morning, Miss Hart said, "I hope everyone had a pleasant weekend." "I did. I went to the opera." Miss Hart looked around the room. "Does anyone else have something to share?" Ruby waved her hand. Glued to every finger was a pink plastic fingernail. "I went to the opera too," said Ruby. "She did not," whispered Angela. Miss Hart folded her hands and looked very serious. "Ruby, dear," said Miss Hart gently, "did you do anything else this weekend?" Ruby peeled off a fingernail. "I hopped," said Ruby. The class giggled. Ruby's ears turned red. "But I did. I hopped around the picnic table 10 times. Ruby looked around the room. "Watch." Ruby sprang from her desk. She hopped forward, she hopped backward, she hopped sideways with both eyes shut. The class cheered and clapped their hands to the beat of Ruby's feet. Ruby was the best hopper they'd ever seen. Miss Hart turned on the tape player and said, "Follow the leader, do the Ruby hop." So Ruby led the class around the room, and everyone copied her. And at noon, Ruby and Angela hopped home for lunch. The end. Readers, that was a really good story. I bet Ruby learned a lesson in that story. And a lesson is something that you learn from the characters. And I bet that she learned she doesn't always have to be like everybody else to fit in. She can just be herself. And you should always be yourself too, because there's nobody else like you. You are the only you. And you're the best that there is of you. So I had a great time reading about Ruby, and we will meet again to read another book soon. Bye!